everyone to the TheraPsil webinar series. Today, we're going to be speaking with a number of patients and healthcare practitioners about their experiences with Section 56 in applying and granting access to psilocybin and going through treatment. And we'll also touch base on a couple other things. Just while we're waiting to get started here, I want to just make a few comments. One is that there's a chat function at the bottom, so feel free to chat in that function. If you have any questions that come up, there's also this little box at the bottom that says Q&A, and you can use the Q&A tool at the bottom to send questions over to our team, and we'll make sure we get to those at the end. So it's just a little bit of housekeeping. Yeah, other than that, let's get started. So again, welcome to webinar 2 of the Legalize Psilocybin campaign. I'm going to start off here with a land acknowledgement as I look outside and see that it's a beautiful sunny day here in Victoria. I want to let you know that that's where I'm conducting this Zoom session from, and that is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich people. I think it's also important because as we're working to legalize psilocybin in Canada, it's good to acknowledge that a large portion of this field of psychedelic medicine wouldn't exist without the Indigenous keepers who have been using and continue to use this medicine. All right, so I'll just quickly touch base on the agenda. So I'll just go through a quick campaign introduction, and then we'll introduce each of our speakers, Laurie, Shamus, and Bruce. I'll touch base on a big piece of news that came out today, the proposed regulations that we've sent out to Health Canada. It's just a draft and the first draft, but nonetheless, I think it's exciting. And then I'll just go through the campaign schedule of the next couple of weeks, share some ways that you can continue to support, how you can donate, thank our sponsors, and then we'll go right to Q&A, and we'll make sure that anyone's questions that come up are answered. All right, so just a quick touch base. I think the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that today is actually the 1 year mark since the first Section 56 exemptions were granted. And to date, 35 patients and 19 healthcare professionals have been given exemptions. So, I mean, this is amazing. And while it's amazing for those about 55 Canadians, there are still many others, 17 patients and 40 healthcare practitioners that we're aware of, and then likely hundreds of others that are waiting on their Section 56 exemptions. What we're going to be talking about today are just the arguments for regulations, and really those are safety and equality, safe supply, trained professionals, making sure that psilocybin is safe for the patients who are the main concern here. And also that there's equality in the way that those regulations and access to psilocybin is given out in our country. That's the reason we've been working towards regulations. It is the continued goal of this entire campaign, and we'll be discussing much of that today. So the goal really is to move away from Section 56 exemptions towards something that is more predictable, safer, and equal. And again, I'll comment in a moment, just after we get through some introductions and talking about those regulations. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers today, and I think we'll be starting off just sending it over to Laurie Brooks. And again, Laurie, today is the 1 day mark since your exemption was first granted. So I want to send it over to you to comment and share with the audience a bit about your journey.
Sure. Thanks, Spencer. Yeah, today is 1 year and I'm still here. I guess I came to TheraPsil kind of backwards. I did my mushroom trip first in the fall of 2019. I was lucky because I just happened to be good friends with Dave Phillips, who is a clinical counselor here in Abbotsford and is also doing the training for TheraPsil now. But Dave had been looking into psilocybin and reading and studying about it, and was wanting to try on a few different people, looking for guinea pigs, I guess. And he approached my husband because I guess he thought my husband had issues he needed to work on. He's sitting in the corner, so laughing. Anyhow, and then it turned out that my cancer, I have colon cancer. I found out in the fall of 2019 that it was back after a year of treatment and going through chemo and radiation and surgeries and thinking that I was cancer free for 4 or 5 months, and then finding that it had come back so quickly was very disheartening. I was pretty, I can't think of even the words to describe where I was at. I was very distressed and thinking that I was going to die and needed help. So Dave, like I said, we're good friends, and he suggested that I try psilocybin. And he showed us a documentary that Johns Hopkins put out. I think it's called A New Understanding. And it was about their psilocybin research. And there was a woman in that documentary. She was a cancer patient, and she just seemed so peaceful and happy despite what was going on in her life. And I just remember looking and saying, that's what I need. And so Dave, I did all the therapy work with Dave, did my first trip, and it was such a huge, profound difference and profound experience for me. I was able to see my cancer as being just one small part of my life, that it was, instead of looming over me and just being this black cloud, that it was suddenly just in a box on the floor beside me. That's where it's been for the last almost 2 years now. So yeah, when I heard about TheraPsil and what you were doing, I said, is there anything I can do to help? And here we are. Went through the whole process of applying for Section 56 exemption. And it was, I can't remember how many days. Do you remember, Spencer, that it took?
104, I believe.
104. And many letters and emails and videos to the health minister. And it was quite a process. Thankful. Much thanks to TheraPsil and especially Benny, who helped me write my letters. And it seemed like I always had to write a letter right after I had had chemo and was feeling really awful. But I managed to get through. And then a year ago today, we got our exemptions. And I remember thinking that there's no way they're going to approve it. It's been so long. And I think we had heard, there had been whispers of we're going to hear something this week, which a year ago. And then we heard on August 4th that they were approved. And it was a surprisingly emotional day for me, just to get that acknowledgement from the government and the health minister that, yeah, these people need help. You know, they give us medical assistance in dying, but what about living? And my cancer situation is not great. My health isn't great even still, but it doesn't mean that I'm ready to die yet. I want to live as long as I possibly can, but I think I should be able to have access to medicine that would allow me to live a happy life and not burdened by all the anxiety and grief and all the emotions that cancer or any kind of terminal diagnosis would give you.
Thank you for sharing that, Laurie, and welcome to today's chat and webinar. And I know that there are tons of questions likely coming in for you here. So we'll jump over to Shamus and we'll get back to answer a bunch of those questions and dig into a bit more about your journey and how you got access. All right, and Shamus, over to you. I'm wondering if you can introduce yourself and a bit about what's brought you to to this
Sure.
moment.
Yeah, and I just want to echo thanks to you, Laurie. Really touching to hear your story, and yeah, good on you for just doing what you've done, and I just really salute your journey, your courage. So my name is Shamus Birkel. I'm 44. I have 2 children. I've been a youth and family worker working with at-risk youth in the local school district for a number of years. And this January, I was diagnosed with stage 4 adenocarcinoma lung cancer, sort of out of the blue. I mean, I knew something was going on last year, but I was just getting sicker and sicker, and then finally got a diagnosis and was in complete shock as to the fact that it was cancer and that it was stage 4. And of course, right away, you make the mistake of going online and looking up statistics for your particular type of cancer, and they're dismal. So just the amount of shock and trauma that comes from a diagnosis like that just rocked me. But I was lucky in that I had a really clear message right away that that this disease, this diagnosis could be about finding freedom in regardless of circumstance, and that there was this gift. Of course, I would never choose this, but because it chose me, there was an opportunity to do some things that otherwise, like all of us, I think we would put off, postpone, diminish, but here it was, right up in my face, and the voice in me said, okay, like, yes, I'm there's no place for fear or panic here. This is about moving into this with my eyes open and my head up. And a huge part of what helped me go from the shock and the overwhelm and the trauma, like, just real deep level of trauma, to suddenly think that you could be dead within a very short period of time. Whereas before, any idea of my own demise was always through the lens of like 50 more years. And when you look at death 50 years down the road, it doesn't look so bad. You think, oh yeah, I'm ready for that. But when suddenly it's up here and it's like, wow, this could be, next month, next year, I don't know. I have young children. I'm not ready to die soon. Shocking. It was for me. And a huge part of my recovery, or like getting to a place of like, yes, was realizing how much of a community I have already around me to support me, and the community that showed up in telling people about my diagnosis. And so the importance of being wide open, not hiding, not being burdened by shame or guilt, or creating separation between myself and those around me, because now I'm different because I've got cancer, and who would understand, and they don't know what that's like. And all those stories were eliminated or diminished by the presence of good people in my life. And so when I heard about the Schedule 56 exemption, and that I was a prime candidate because I'm a terminal cancer patient, it was just another recognition of, here's an offering of support. There are people who want to help you do this, access this medicine, and Shamus, the voice said, avail yourself of the support that's offering itself. So I said yes, and I thought, if I can stick my foot in the door for my own benefit, and also for the benefit of those people in the future or currently who need to access this medicine in a legitimate and held way, like with a container of recognition and support and therapy. I want to do that. So yeah, that's brought me here. Here I am. I just applied 3 weeks ago for my exemption, and so I'm sort of in the midst of the process. There's been some back and forth about clarification about what they want, the assurance that the health minister needs to know that she could offer me exemption. So I'm just sort of midway in that process, but it feels like a huge step was taken just in the deciding to apply and then getting the help from TheraPsil to do that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Shamus. And similarly, I know I've got lots of questions for you. So we'll get right back to that right after we send it over to Bruce Tobin. So Bruce, I would love for you to share your experience as I guess now I can call you a psilocybin psychotherapist who's been treating a number of people who have exemptions now, and your journey, how you got here.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. I guess I would like to begin not by talking so much about my work as a therapist, but about my recent journey. Spencer just a few minutes ago mentioned that we have had approvals for 35 patients and 19 healthcare professionals. I'm the founder of TheraPsil and the current president of the board. I've been a psychotherapist for about 40 years now, and following August the 4th of last year, I treated 6 of the first legal patients. But I've had my own experience recently, and that's what I'd like to focus on to begin with today. We've received these approvals for the 19 healthcare professionals, and we want to receive many more. And there's no hardcore experimental research that confirms the importance of therapists themselves having a psilocybin experience to better understand what their patients go through. But as we look back through the history of the research with psychedelic patients, we find that over and over again, that every expert who has commented on this question regarding trainee psychedelic experience regards this as a total no-brainer. And now I'm able to add my own name to the list of therapists supporting access to psilocybin for trainees based on my own experience. So on May 14th of this year, I ingested 5 grams of dried organic psilocybin mushrooms under the supervision of a healthcare professional and had a psychedelic session according to TheraPsil's clinical protocol, which I had played a big role in developing. And so I'd like to share this experience with you. COVID has put the specter of mortality right up in the faces of all of us over this past year and a half. And piggybacked on top of all of that has been my personal journey into working with dying patients and hearing their stories and being with them as they express some of their deepest hopes and fears about death and dying. Well, this year I received a third very personal layer of encounter with death and dying. I myself turned 73 and received a diagnosis of prostate cancer for myself, though it's not life-threatening at this point. So everyone who knows anything about psychedelics might guess that with all this focus on death and dying in my recent life, that is my own personal set and setting, that this theme might come up for me big time in my own journey. And you'd be right. My recent journey was all about my own encounter with dying, facing my own mortality, grieving for the loss of all that I love, and coming to terms with my own finitude and the transitory nature of my existence. I went through some real profound sadness and grief. I did some really deep crying about the future loss of my own life. I went through a period of total agony. But I came out the other side to a place of beautiful peace and acceptance. And since then, I've felt lighter, a huge sense of relief, as if I'd cleaned out a lot of emotional sludge out of my system. And I felt now a renewed clarity about what is really important to me. And what came to me so clearly from that last experience was the need to live each day fully, to live each moment fully, to open to each moment, and love as fully as we can, and spread that love around to whoever will receive it. So I came through my own dark night of the soul with a sense of peace and clarity, a sense of mission coming out of it, a sense that it's easier to both love and be loved. It's easier to find the joy in the little things that make life so special. And I feel completely convinced that my own experience has created a deep and beautiful bond of empathy and understanding with my patients, that I indeed know now what they go through, and they know that I know. And this is a landscape that's been easier for both of us to walk through because we've shared it together.
For that, Bruce, and I guess we can dive without further ado right into some of the things that we want to talk about here. I guess the first thing, in one of the other webinars that we've done, we've discussed what the psychedelic journey was like. And I guess today, as we approach the 1-year anniversary of what was the first exemptions for Laurie, yourself, and a number of other Canadians, and as we celebrate, the fact that you've got an exemption, and Shamus, that you're now in a really good position to receive an exemption. One of the things that I wanted to discuss was just what it's been like, and this really goes back to, Laurie, one of the first things that you mentioned, not knowing whether or not you get the exemption. I wanted to talk about the predictability of exemptions, and first ask you, Laurie, what was it like to have to wait, not knowing whether or not you'd get access to a substance that had given you so much help?
Yeah, it was just a strange experience having to wait for this approval for something that I knew was such a huge help. And to have to answer questions from people from some office of the government, and they had no clue, no experience themselves. So only the preconceived ideas that they had about magic mushrooms. And I don't know, it just seems like such a crazy way to go about things, that I have to write letters and follow-up letters and get a doctor's note and a therapist's letter and apply to the government for something that I should be able to just have access to.
For sure. And you're coming up on your 1 year.
Yeah.
Today is the 1 year since you got it.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, it's only a 1-year exemption. What are your thoughts on reapplying?
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit worried because, yeah, I wonder what's going to happen. I didn't cooperate and die during the year that they gave me, so and I'm still going through cancer treatment. So if I need another trip, so I've done 2. I did one in October 2019 illegally, one with my exemption last October. And it seems to be like at the year mark where I start feeling like, "Yeah, I think I need another check-in. What do I do this October? Are they not going to let me?" Um, I don't know. My feelings are, yeah, either help and lead or get out of the way and let doctors and therapists handle it. I don't know why. I guess what I'm trying to say is, why do I have to apply to some person in Ottawa that knows nothing about it to get medicine that I need?
Well, help and lead or get out of the way. Well said, Laurie.
Yeah.
And Shamus, I'd like to bring it over to you. I realize it's only been 3 weeks that you've had an exemption out, but you commented that that was kind of the first step. I mean, I realize that getting access is never as easy as just sending in an exemption. You've got to learn for yourself, what psilocybin is, and wanted to turn it over to you to ask. Looks like. Hey there, Shamus. Sorry, I didn't realize that you had just dropped off. So I'll rephrase this, but I just wanted to send the question over to you that as someone who's just submitted an exemption, what was the process like submitting it? I heard you mention, that it's not really just about submitting it, that there's work put in before that. And again, the reason I'm asking you is like, what are your thoughts on whether or not you'll get access right now? How was that process of applying and learning about it?
Well, I'd say thanks to TheraPsil and people like Laurie, who have sort of created created a channel and gone before. For me, myself, it was fairly straightforward. Luckily, I have a supportive doctor, my GP, and then working with Natasha through TheraPsil, sort of knowing, anticipating what it is that they need to hear in terms of their requirements to give exemption, made it so much easier. It was a very streamlined process in terms of just making the application. So I'm really grateful for that. I feel like I had a way easier go of it than a lot of the people who were the forerunners in this situation. And then since then, I mean, I've had to answer some questions, right away. They wanted to know whether I had exhausted my other avenues of therapy or medical intervention to deal with anxiety or depression. So it's interesting when you have to then prove to someone that there's no name attached. It's just someone at the office of requesting information. So having to justify or justify your legitimate need for something is a little ironic. But whatever, if they just need more information, I'm happy to, because then it clarifies what the need actually is for me. So it gets clearer. It's like, oh yeah, right. This is a big deal and this is really important. And so of course I'll answer whatever questions I need to be in good communication with them. So we'll see how that goes, how many questions I have to answer. I'm just seeing from,
I hope.
yeah. I'm not letting it dehumanize me. Just to respond to someone's comment there. It could be, but like anything, just dealing with cancer diagnosis or dealing with the world of oncology and the medical system could feel very dehumanizing. However, it's like so clear to me that this is not about losing my sense of self in relation to the circumstances or the systems that are in place around me, but it's also that opportunity to go, wow, I am human, and I'm dealing with all the human things that we're all dealing with. And so it's actually a celebration of humanity to go, wow, right, I have kids, I'm, yes, I have fear, I have pain, I have, all this stuff going on. I'm going to die just like all of us. And so, wow, isn't that humanizing? Isn't that real and refreshing? Because it cuts through so much of the stuff that, gets in the way for all of us, myself included. The day-to-day, the humdrum, the distractions, the petty grievances that we might hold. And it's like a really good opportunity to come back like, whoa, what's this all about? And Bruce, hearing your experience, just such a good reminder about what's really important, and appreciating the gift of the moment and of the day is so important.
Well, thank you much, Shamus and Bruce. I mean, it's perfect now to turn it over to you and ask that, as a health professional, that I can personally advocate for how much you care about the people who you've been supporting, fighting tirelessly to get access for yourself and other healthcare practitioners. I mean, what was that process like, and trying to communicate the importance of having trained healthcare practitioners delivering this therapy, and how has it affected your ability?
Yes, well, August the 4th of last year was an absolutely huge day for me. You know that personally, Spencer, because you were celebrating that day with me. Prior to that, it had been 3 long years of negotiating with Health Canada. Though we were hopeful that there would be a breakthrough in those negotiations, I was expecting right up till August the 4th of last year to be soon appearing in federal court, asking the government of Canada to affirm for psilocybin what a number of years ago they had already affirmed as one of the basic rights of all Canadians in terms of access to medical cannabis. And so I can completely understand the frustrations and the angst of patients who are waiting day after day in a state of suffering, waiting for the government to acknowledge a right which the Supreme Court of Canada has already acknowledged. And I'd like to just spend a moment to quote from the Supreme Court ruling from 2016 regarding the rights of patients when it comes to deciding their own medical treatment. The Supreme Court said, the prohibition on possession of medical marijuana, and we're going to substitute the word psilocybin in here now, limits the Section 7 Charter rights to liberty of the person in 2 ways. First, the prohibition deprives medical marijuana users of their liberty by imposing the threat of imprisonment on conviction. Second, it limits the liberty of medical users by foreclosing reasonable medical choices through the threat of criminal prosecution. Similarly, by forcing a person to choose between a legal but inadequate treatment and an illegal but more effective one, the law also infringes on security of the person. So we live in a society whose fundamental document, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, has been clearly interpreted to mean that as citizens of Canada, we as patients have the right to determine our choice of medical treatment. The government does not seem to be fully realizing or respecting this right at this time. And so it is now incumbent on all of us to move forward to make sure the government understands their responsibility to respond to the patients of Canada. And that's our current task that lies before us.
For sure, Bruce, and very well said. I mean, it is their responsibility to respond. And so a question for both you and Laurie. I know that you've both connected with your peers. So for Bruce, you with other healthcare practitioners who have are seeking Section 56 exemptions so they can better learn how to do psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy to treat their patients. And Laurie, you've been participating in the advocacy committee with a number of other people who are submitting and have submitted and got access to Section 56. One of the big things that I think is clear here and that is also in our charter is our equity rights, our equality rights, and our rights to be treated similarly. So I guess a question to you, Laurie, is what have some of the other folks who you've been speaking with, specifically those who haven't gotten access and after months of waiting, what are their thoughts? Is there anything, like, what are your thoughts on how they've been treated and who should get access to psilocybin?
Yeah, I mean, who makes that decision? Why was I granted access and a Section 56 and these other people are still waiting and waiting and waiting? It makes no sense. I guess the one meeting that I was in, because I missed one because we were away on vacation, but I'd forgotten actually, because I did my trip. I've done 2 trips and I really feel like I'm just living my best life right now. And I'm happy, and cancer is always in the back of my mind, but it's in the back of my mind that I'm able to get out and enjoy my life. And then to hear these other people and they're suffering like they were, I actually had to sign off because it was really hard to hear and go, oh yeah, I was like that too. It's a hard spot to be in, and when you're going through cancer, the doctors and nurses are all, I don't know how many times I was told, there's no reason for you to feel pain, so just let us know and we'll prescribe something. Sure, that's physical pain, but what about the emotional and pain that these people are going through? Just having to say goodbye, or maybe not say goodbye, but having to face, like Shamus said and Bruce said, when you have to face your own mortality, and that it might not be 30 or 50 years in the future, it might be next month or next year. It's a huge shift in your life, and just the fact that your life is torn away from you. What about these people, and how are we going to help them? And why is it up to somebody in the government to say what we can do to get help? So I forget what the question was, but yeah, just hearing other patients that so badly need help, and I just think, get the help you need and worry about the rest later. But that's me. Not everybody wants to do that. They are waiting so they can do it legally, and yeah, let's hurry up and get it done.
Thank you, Laurie, and thank you for all the work you do, because I imagine it is incredibly tough to sit through these calls and to get emotional. So really, thank you so much. And it's absolutely reciprocal from the other patients. That thank you for all the work that you have done.
I just have to learn to be okay with crying. I've learned that over the last year.
And Bruce, over to you. From what you've spoken with the peers and many of the people who you are actually going to be training, I mean, what are your thoughts on some physicians and therapists getting access, but not others?
Well, when I began this quest about 6 years ago, and started to talk to medical people, both physicians and psychiatrists, I don't think in the first couple of months of doing that, I found anyone within the medical profession that was distinctly supportive. Yes, I knew of people, but I wasn't meeting them myself. What a change over the last 6 years. Now, when I speak with doctors and psychiatrists, it's difficult to find a medical person who is not quite interested, if not totally supportive. So the whole climate within the medical profession has changed. Within the counseling profession, I see the same kind of evolution. I remember giving a talk to my professional association, the BC Association of Clinical Counselors, back in 2015. And the talk was about communicating in a professionally responsible way with our patients about access to cannabis and psychedelics. And I remember several of my colleagues expressing indignation at that time that my professional association would support such a discussion. As of last year, I received a letter from the president of my professional association expressing her personal support for my work and the work that TheraPsil has done. And so there's been a huge upsurge of support for this within the counseling profession. Clinical counselors, psychologists, the BC ACC regular newsletter featured a special on the work that I'd done with TheraPsil. So it's out now. We're slightly over a tipping point, but we have to keep moving to preserve that momentum. All the professionals that I talk to, we all express the same impatience with how long it's taken to lead to clarity in terms of regulations that are analogous to the current cannabis regulations. Those regulations are now working smoothly without kerfuffles. There's no reason why such regulations cannot move just as smoothly for psilocybin as they do with cannabis. And that's really the sentiment that is almost universally shared among my colleagues.
Cool. Thank you very much, Bruce. And yeah, there is this feel of times changing, and many healthcare practitioners wondering what's next. How do we move forward and make the next step? And really this starts to tie into the final question here. And Shamus, I think this is something that I can ask you. Is just like, what is your thoughts as someone who has not been through the experience yet on ensuring that you're getting, a safe supply of psilocybin and a trained healthcare practitioner? What would you like to see as a Canadian who now or will soon be getting an exemption, hopefully be getting an exemption? What would you like to see as far as a solution to a currently inadequate Section 56 process?
You're asking me what I would like to see in place for other people or myself and other people to be able to access in a fair and equitable way psychedelic therapy.
Exactly, and your thoughts on perhaps how some of these shortcomings of it, for an example, is the lack of supply. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we can do better? You know, what would you like to see from the government? And
Absolutely, I'm just thinking, and when you gave the land acknowledgement to the Indigenous people of Victoria and wherever we live here, for me it's the Sinixt and the Tanaha First Peoples, and medicine, all medicine, like the food we eat, the herbs that we grow or gather for tea or for benefit, and the psychedelic medicines, these are plant medicines, or in this case mushrooms, they come from the earth. And so there's this direct connection between ourselves and the earth that made the earth, then however you want to frame that, whatever name we give to that. So to me, there's something beautiful about reclaiming our indigenous right to take medicine, take things. In the teachings that I've received, it's like medicine is defined as the energy that brings healing. And so it's a reminder that it's not the substance, no matter what the substance is. We can treat things as drugs and take them to get something, and nothing likes to be used. No substance likes to be used. If they're used, they can cause harm. Whereas medicine is recognition, it's the energy that comes through that brings the healing. It's not in the substance. And so I think for people to be able to access medicine directly, I mean, these mushrooms grow from the earth. I've seen them growing on the beach at the lake down where I live. They're in the woods. So I think the importance of direct access to medicine that's done in a good way, I think that's totally legitimate. I would not want my psilocybin mushrooms to come from the government. I'm sorry, I just don't think they do a very good job of it. No offense. We saw what they tried to do with cannabis, and it was a failure. The strains they were trying to use didn't have medicinal value. They were grown in a lab in Texas, and then Canada said, "Okay, we'll use that." So I think direct access for people to the medicine, but held in the context of a therapeutic container, is so important, and that's something that we've lost with the underground, clandestine nature of these what we call illicit substances. Is sad, because then we lose the social context, the cultural context, and the context of support and community that comes when we do something and it's out in the open and we're supported and we can receive help and guidance. If it generates questions or confusion, there's people that understand what we've gone through, Bruce, like yourself, and they can provide support and guidance. So I think that part is key. We so need people who have been trained, who are able to legitimize their experience. And I wish I have a wonderful GP. I wish that she could legitimately be the provider of this medicine. It's just, having a personal relationship with someone who then can condone and support and hold space for that kind of an experience, I think is so important, rather than people thinking they need to go off and do it on their own in secret with the guilt and the shame and the stigma that's attached to that. That causes so much harm. We see that with all sorts of things that people take and how the harm that causes. So at the very least, in terms of harm reduction, being able to have the legitimate access to psilocybin and therapists who have relevant experience that they can bring to bear to that is so key.
Incredibly well said, Shamus. I really like that, and I know that you and I had spoken about that. Being able to do this not shamefully, not hidden, not in a way that's as someone might have mentioned might try to dehumanize, but in a way where there's support and we realize it as a bit of a medicine. We're really coming up on the end here, and I mean I've got many more questions, and I feel like we could chat forever. So I just wanted to say thank you to all three of you, Laurie, Thomas, and Shamus, and at this point just allow you to say any closing remarks here before we just get to the point where we let people know how they can continue to advocate. So I want to put the floor open and allow any of you to say anything that you would like, and otherwise we can wrap this up.
I would just like to mention that in addition to our right as citizens of Canada to be able to access organic mushrooms, Canadian citizens also need the right to access synthesized psilocybin as an option. Many people prefer the organic variety. Many people have a belief that there are certain substances within the organic mushroom that might not appear in the synthesized version. But some people also, a minority of people, have difficulties with nausea with organic mushrooms. And for those people, that nausea can really get in the way of many of the most apparent benefits of psilocybin. So we need to maintain that option for them as well. And I guess in closing, I would say that my greatest vision for the future is for that day when we hear that news that access to psilocybin will be based on a decision between a patient and their doctor, not between a patient, their doctor, and an unnamed bureaucrat in Ottawa. Let's hasten that day.
That's right.
You're here.
Hear, hear.
Much, Bruce and Laurie and Shamus. I guess I'll just quickly then comment on something that I think is very exciting. And today, on the 1 year anniversary, we did release regulations, and those regulations were put together by the TheraPsil team and a couple lawyers, doctors, healthcare practitioners, and a patient who worked in policy, Jim. And they weren't anything, it wasn't anything too extreme. What it really is, and thank you, Bruce, for quoting past court cases, is it's taking the cannabis regulations, and Shamus, like you had mentioned, it's a substance, right? It's a natural substance, one that has been growing out of the ground, that one in plant, this one in fungi for years. And being able to get access to that, not necessarily a drug, as drugs necessitate clinical trials, but to get access to a natural substance, and in this case, a controlled substance, is what we're looking for in those regulations, and to make sure that the problems that we had discussed here, primarily around safety, equality, and predictability, that they're solved. So we just took the regulations around cannabis, something that our courts, as Bruce again had mentioned, have already determined what is constitutional and what is not. Something that has had 20 years of work put into it from our government, and just changed around, the words cannabis for psilocybin and made some other edits. And of primus important there is, we want to make sure that psilocybin is a healthcare decision between a patient and a doctor, not an administrative or political decision. No, the patient's healthcare shouldn't be a political thing. And there should be trained healthcare practitioners. Of course, something to note in there is you should be able to grow your own too, and whether you want synthetic or natural, that should be up to you. So that's all I'll say about the regulations today. We've got them posted on our website, and we will be publicly consulting with anybody interested, along with the patients and healthcare practitioners and members at TheraPsil. And we hope to work with the government so that I can stop pulling all of you into these meetings. So that's the purpose here, is absolutely, Bruce, to get to that day. And I guess my final remark on that would be that as we have doctors and patients using psilocybin today, and some seeking support, such as yourself, Shamus, today, the need for regulations is today. And if anything, it's a year overdue. So I certainly hope we can get to that point very soon. And I thank you all so much for the amazing advocacy that you're doing in raising your own voices, but also other voices. It's the nice thing about healthcare advocacy is very, very seldomly is there any difference between advocating for yourself and advocating for others. So thank you. So to everyone in the audience, I just want to also thank you as well, and that that your voice does matter. The reason that patient voices and doctors' voices are raised and heard is because of the tags we get on social media, the tweets, people writing to their MPs and sharing this story with their friends. We've done a fantastic poll that is showing that there is overwhelming support of psilocybin regulations in Canada, and the government tends to deal with things when they become too uncomfortable to ignore. So I ask you to help us all at TheraPsil, all the patients and healthcare practitioners, to help us get heard, so that we can stop, so that we can get to that point where psilocybin is medically available and regulated. Other than that, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone who has donated and supported TheraPsil as well. That's the reason we're able to be loud and what keeps us operating. And with that, I will conclude today's webinar. Again, thank you so much, Laurie and Shamus and Bruce. Take care, have a wonderful evening. And if anyone else has any other questions or would like to get in touch, please feel free to reach out to us on social, or email us at info@therapsil.ca.